The roar of the engine had once been the soundtrack of my freedom, a deep, steady pulse beneath the roar of the city. But on that cold morning, when I stepped outside to find the empty space where my car had always stood, the silence was deafening. The street was quiet, almost too quiet. The frost clung to the cracked pavement like shattered glass, glittering under the pale dawn light. My breath came out in short, ragged bursts as I scanned the familiar scene: the crooked mailbox, the faded garden gnome that leaned drunkenly on its pedestal, the tired old street lamp blinking its last flickers of electricity. And then, the space. The hollow, aching void where my car used to be. Gone. Stolen. Sold, without a single word to me. I felt the cold seep into my bones, sharper than the winter chill. The betrayal was suffocating. My neighbors were already starting their day, casting curious glances as I stood frozen, the weight of shock pressing me to the spot. How could they? How could someone sell my car, my sanctuary, my escape, without asking? Without a hint, a whisper, a warning? I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms as the heat of anger flared inside me. It wasn't just a car. It was everything I'd worked for. The long nights, the sacrifices, the dreams tied up in that rusty steering wheel. And now? It was gone. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Because I had learned the hard way that tears don't bring back what's lost. They don't fix what's broken. Instead, I made a choice. If they thought they could steal from me and walk away, they were wrong. I would come back. I would be reborn. And this time, I would own their world. The cold morning air burned as I took a deep breath, the first spark of a plan igniting deep within me. I wasn't going to let this theft define me. No. It was only the beginning. The first few days after I discovered my car was gone were a haze of disbelief and bitter cold mornings. Each time I stepped outside, my eyes instinctively searched for the familiar shape of that car, only to be met with an empty space that felt like a cavern of loss. That car was more than metal and wheels. It was my freedom, my refuge from the grinding monotony of a world that had turned its back on me. The deep leather smell of the interior, the worn steering wheel that had molded to my hands over the years, the faint crackle of my favorite playlist echoing through the speakers, all stolen away without a whisper. Neighbors murmured with sympathy behind closed doors, but no one knew the full weight of what had been taken. Not just a car, but a part of my soul. I tried to reach out to the seller, the person who had sold my property, but every attempt was met with silence or a cold refusal. I sat in my tiny apartment, the walls closing in like shadows intent on swallowing me whole. The glow of my phone illuminated my face, worn and tired from sleepless nights filled with thoughts of justice and revenge. The world had pushed me down once, taken my car, my dignity, but it would not break me. My fingers trembled as I dialed a number I'd saved weeks ago, a local used car dealer known for acquiring vehicles through questionable means. The man on the other end had been nothing but polite, never asking too many questions, never judging. "Is this the car you wanted?" he asked one afternoon, the faint noise of a bustling garage in the background. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. Not the one they took. But I want theirs. Rebirth wasn't just a metaphor. It was a transformation. The woman who once cried in the rain over what was lost had changed. Beneath the surface simmered a cold fury, a calculated fire burning with a singular purpose. I began researching everything about the family that had sold my car, their house, their habits, their possessions. It was like pulling at a thread, unraveling a tapestry woven with lies and entitlement. I discovered they had a car, a gleaming black SUV, parked carelessly in the driveway, a symbol of their arrogance and disregard. The image of that vehicle stayed with me, a challenge, a beacon, a promise. If they thought they could sell what was mine and walk away, I would remind them exactly who they had crossed. When the day came to buy their car, I was meticulous. Every detail mattered. The paperwork, the negotiation, the quiet pride in knowing that I was about to turn the tables. The dealer smiled slyly as I handed over the check. "You're playing a dangerous game." I didn't flinch. "I'm not playing. I'm winning." That SUV roared beneath me like a beast awakened. The leather seat hugged my body, the power beneath the hood answering every tap on the accelerator with fierce obedience. As I pulled into the neighborhood, the familiar houses blurred past, but the feeling was anything but familiar. The house I had once passed with only passing interest was now the stage of my silent triumph. I parked the SUV directly in front of their driveway, the tires resting on the cracked concrete like a silent message. This was no accident. This was a declaration. They had taken what was mine, and I had taken what was theirs. I hid behind the curtains, eyes sharp as knives, watching the faces behind those windows. The shock, the confusion, the fury. It was all there. Whispers carried on the wind. Neighbors glancing curiously at the new car parked boldly in the most visible place. I felt a surge of satisfaction, but beneath it, a darker pulse. This was only the beginning. Their world was about to crumble. Night had fallen, casting a blanket of shadows over the quiet street where my newly acquired ride sat like a silent sentinel. The SUV gleamed under the dim glow of the street lamps, black as my resolve, cold and unyielding. I stood just beyond the hedges, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest, watching the house with narrowed eyes. The curtains moved. A silhouette appeared. Then two. My sister and her husband, the very people who had dared to sell my car without a word. Their voices floated through the air, sharp and frantic. "Who the hell parked that car there?" My sister hissed, eyes blazing with disbelief. Her husband's face twisted in anger. "It's that woman. She's trying to send a message." A small smile tugged at my lips. Good. They hadn't seen me, but I saw them. Every flicker of fear, every edge of panic sharpening in their voices. I stepped out from the shadows, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. "Looking for me?" I said softly, voice steady but fierce. They both turned, startled, eyes wide with shock. My sister's mouth opened, then closed. Her expression twisted into something fierce, a venomous mix of anger and fear. You bought that car!" She spat, taking a step forward, chest heaving. I folded my arms, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Yes. And it's parked exactly where everyone can see it, in front of your house, in front of your neighbors. A reminder." Her husband's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" He growled. "This isn't over." "No," I agreed, voice low and cold. "It's just the beginning." The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken threats. I could feel their desperation like a wave crashing against me. But I was steady, rooted in a place of quiet fury and unwavering strength. "You think you can intimidate me?" My sister sneered, stepping closer, hands clenched into fists. "You think I'll just sit back and watch you destroy everything?" I met her rage with something sharper. "I'm not here to intimidate you. I'm here to remind you that you crossed a line you can't uncross. You sold what was mine without a second thought. You took everything I held dear. Now, I take what's yours." Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "Revenge will ruin you. You'll lose yourself if you keep walking down this path." For a moment, I allowed the doubt to flicker, just a flicker, but then I pushed it down like a dying ember. "I lost myself the moment you stole from me," I said. "Revenge isn't what will ruin me. It's what will save me." Their faces twisted, the lines of fear deepening. "You're making a mistake," her husband warned. "People like you, they don't get happy endings." I smiled, cold, sure, unstoppable. "Maybe I don't want a happy ending. Maybe I want justice, and that's exactly what I'm going to get." As I turned and walked away, the echo of their shouts fading behind me, I felt something shift inside. The line had been drawn, the game fully underway. But in the depths of my soul, a shadow lingered, a quiet whisper warning me that the price of this battle might be higher than I could imagine. The final move was coming, and this time no one would be able to stop it. The night was thick with fog, curling through the streets like a living thing. The dim glow of the street lamps cast long, wavering shadows, turning familiar shapes into sinister silhouettes. I moved through the mist, the chill pressing against my skin, but inside I burned with a quiet fury that no cold could quell. Behind me, the house where my sister and her husband lived loomed like a fortress, untouched only because no one had dared to challenge them. Until now. I slipped into the shadows, eyes sharp as knives, watching the faint flicker of movement through their windows. They didn't know I was here. They didn't know I was watching. But they would. I had spent weeks gathering the evidence, the whispers, the secrets, every hidden truth that would shatter the illusion they had built. Tonight, I would begin to unravel it. Lila paced the length of the living room, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. Her husband sat rigid on the couch, jaw clenched tight, eyes darting toward the windows. "They've bought our car," she whispered, voice brittle. "It's parked right in front of the house." He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "It's a message. She's not done yet." Lila's eyes flashed with anger, but beneath it was fear. The kind of fear that came from knowing the tide was turning, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "We need to fight back," she said. "If we don't, she'll destroy everything." Her husband's gaze hardened. "Then we make sure she regrets ever crossing us." I saw it all. The fear, the desperation, the unraveling. I felt no pity, only cold satisfaction. But I knew the fight was far from over. They were dangerous. They had the resources, the connections, and the power. But I had something far stronger, the truth. The weapon they never saw coming. Back at my apartment, the phone rang. The number was unknown, but something inside told me to answer. "Sarah," a voice whispered, low and cautious. "We need to talk. It's about Lila." I held the receiver tighter. "Who is this?" The voice hesitated. "Someone who wants to help. Someone who knows what she's done." My heart quickened. For the first time, an ally in this war. Meet me at the corner cafe. Midnight. Alone. The line went dead. The cafe was deserted except for a lone figure waiting in the shadows. I approached cautiously. "Who are you?" I demanded. A man stepped forward, face obscured by the hood of his jacket. "Call me Daniel. I used to work with Lila. I know her secrets, and I know how to bring her down." I studied him, weighing the risk. "I'm listening," I said. Daniel smiled grimly. "Good. Because this war is about to get a lot more dangerous." Lila's world was closing in. The cracks were deepening, the pressure unbearable. "We have to stop her," she hissed. "Whatever it takes." Her husband reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek black phone. "I have a plan." That night, I stood at my window, watching the city lights flicker like stars caught in fog. The game was on, and I was ready. But somewhere deep inside, a question whispered through the silence. How much of yourself can you lose before there's nothing left to fight for? The answer was coming. And when it did, everything would change. The days blurred into nights, and nights into whispered plans and silent calculations. Every call, every shadow, every stolen glance across the city streets was a thread in the web I was weaving, a web meant to ensnare those who had betrayed me. Daniel became my unexpected ally, a ghost from Lila's past who carried secrets darker than I had imagined. His information was precise: names, dates, transactions, and most importantly, vulnerabilities. Tonight we met again in a cramped back room of a rundown diner. The air smelled of stale coffee and desperation, but in that little space, hope took root. "Lila's cornered," Daniel said, eyes gleaming with grim satisfaction. "She's not just worried about losing money anymore. She's terrified of exposure, and she's ready to fight dirty." I nodded, feeling the fire reignite inside me. "Then, let's give her hell." Within days, the first cracks appeared. I anonymously leaked sensitive documents to the press, proof of Lila's hidden offshore accounts and financial manipulations. The scandal exploded overnight, the headlines unforgiving. Lila's carefully curated image shattered like glass. The neighbors whispered, the phone calls flooded in. The fortress of lies she'd built was crumbling, and she was losing control. But they weren't going down without a fight. One rainy evening, I received a message: "Meet me at our old spot. Tonight. Alone." My heart pounded, a mixture of dread and defiance. It was Lila. I arrived at the abandoned pier, the wind whipping my hair as waves crashed angrily against the docks. She was waiting, rain soaking through her coat, eyes wild with fury and fear. "You think you've won?" She spat, stepping close. "You think this is over?" "It's just begun," I said, steady and cold. She lunged, words sharp as knives. "You don't know what you're messing with, Sarah. You'll lose everything." I held her gaze, unflinching. "I've already lost what mattered. This is my chance to take it back." The meeting left us both shaken but resolute. The battle had turned personal. No longer was this just about stolen cars or money. It was about pride, power, and survival. Back in my apartment, I stared at the city skyline, the lights flickering like distant promises. I had become someone else, stronger, harder, more dangerous. But I knew one truth deep down, in this game. The line between hunter and hunted could blur in an instant. And I wasn't about to become the prey. The cold bite of the early morning air crept through the cracked window pane as I sat curled on the edge of my bed, the weight of exhaustion and anticipation heavy on my chest. Outside, the city was still cloaked in shadow, but my mind was ablaze with restless thoughts. Lila's words echoed in my ears like a curse. "You don't know what you're messing with." But I did know. I knew every secret she tried to bury, every lie she had spun, and every betrayal she had orchestrated. And now, I was ready to set those lies on fire. Daniel had become a lifeline, a beacon in the darkness of deceit. He was relentless, scouring financial records, uncovering hidden accounts, and exposing the dirty dealings that had fed Lila's empire. "Sarah," he said during one of our late-night meetings, voice low but urgent, "I've found something big." I leaned forward, the pulse in my veins quickening. "What is it?" "There's a shell company tied directly to her. It's laundering money, hiding assets from everyone, even her husband." The implications hit me like a hammer. This was the chink in her armor, the final piece that could bring her down. I spent the next days crafting the perfect trap. Every move calculated, every word chosen carefully. The documents would leak at the right moment, the evidence undeniable. I contacted a trusted journalist, someone known for exposing the powerful without fear. The story would blow the lid off Lila's world, exposing the corruption and lies in brutal detail. As the article went live, I watched the chaos unfold. Lila's phone rang non-stop. Her once commanding presence diminished with each passing hour. But Lila was far from defeated. One night, I returned home to find a note slipped under my door. "You think this ends with you? Think again." A chill ran down my spine. Days later, our paths crossed again, this time in the shadowed halls of a downtown office building. She approached me with a predator's grace, eyes blazing with fury and desperation. "You've made a grave mistake, Sarah," she hissed, voice dripping venom. "I won't go down quietly." "I'm not afraid of you," I replied, voice steady but fierce. She smirked, leaning in close enough for me to feel her breath. "Good. Because the real game begins now." The warning hung heavy in the air as she walked away, leaving me with a chilling certainty. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. And with every step I took closer to my revenge, I felt the cost, the toll it was taking on my soul. The city lights flickered through the rain-speckled window, casting fractured reflections across the cold floor of my apartment. The air smelled of damp concrete and something sharper, anticipation, danger, the faintest hint of victory. Days blurred into nights as I plotted my next move, the weight of the past months settling into my bones like a second skin. The game I was playing was no longer about stolen cars or petty revenge. It was a war waged in shadows, with stakes far higher than I had ever imagined. Lila's threat haunted me, a dark promise whispered in the corridors of power. The real game begins now. But I was ready. I had to be. Late one evening, Daniel burst into my apartment, urgency burning in his eyes. "Sarah, you need to see this." He tossed a stack of documents onto the table. Emails, bank transfers, photos, proof of Lila's deepest secrets. But there was something else. Something new. "Look at this," Daniel said, pointing at a series of encrypted messages between Lila and a shadowy figure no one knew. "She's been working with someone more dangerous than we thought." My breath caught. The shadows were deeper, darker. The game was far from over. I spent hours decoding the messages, each word a thread pulling me deeper into a conspiracy that threatened everything I had fought for. The truth was a labyrinth of lies, alliances, and betrayals that reached beyond my family. And now, they knew I was coming. Walking home late that night, the rain began to fall again, cold and relentless. As I turned a corner, a figure stepped out from the darkness, tall, cloaked in black. "Sarah," the voice was low, menacing. "You're meddling in things beyond your control." I didn't flinch. "You don't scare me." A laugh, bitter and cold. "You should be afraid. This isn't a game anymore, it's survival." Before I could react, the figure disappeared into the night, leaving behind a warning etched in my mind. That night, alone in the quiet of my apartment, I stared into the darkness. The road ahead was perilous, lined with shadows I couldn't yet see. But I was no longer the woman who had lost everything. I was a force of reckoning. And I would see this through, no matter the cost. The rain had ceased, leaving the streets slick and shimmering under the cold glow of the streetlights. The city breathed quietly around me, oblivious to the storm that churned beneath its surface. But I could feel it, the tension, the sharp edges of danger closing in. Every step I took echoed louder in the emptiness of the night, each breath a reminder that I was walking a razor's edge. I was alone, but I was not powerless. My mind raced with plans, contingencies, and the knowledge that my enemies were watching, waiting for me to slip. My phone buzzed violently against the worn leather of my jacket. An anonymous message appeared. "Stop now, or lose everything." I stared at the screen, fingers trembling for just a moment before I deleted the threat without hesitation. Fear was a luxury I could no longer afford. Instead, I clenched my jaw and pressed onward. The message was proof they were scared of what I was capable of. Later that evening, Daniel arrived with a new piece of intelligence, a name whispered in the darkest circles, a puppeteer pulling strings far beyond our reach. "Marcus," Daniel said gravely. "He's the one backing Lila. The real power behind the throne." I felt the room close in as the weight of this revelation settled over me. The fight was no longer just personal. It was political, dangerous. Days later, I found myself in a dimly lit parking garage, heart pounding beneath my leather jacket. The echo of footsteps bounced off concrete walls as I awaited the meeting I had insisted on. From the shadows emerged Marcus, a man whose presence radiated cold authority. His eyes met mine, calculating and sharp. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, but with a threat that froze my blood. "I'm not leaving," I replied steadily. "Not until you understand. This ends now." A slow smile curved his lips. "You're brave. Or foolish. Maybe both." The words between us were daggers, sharp and unrelenting. I could feel the invisible tension snapping like thin wire, each sentence a move in a deadly game neither of us could afford to lose. "You think you can destroy what I built?" Marcus challenged, voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea what you're up against." I leaned forward, eyes blazing. "I know exactly what I'm fighting for, and I will burn it all down if I have to." For a moment, silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then Marcus turned away, his footsteps fading into the darkness, leaving me standing alone, unshaken. The path ahead was darker than ever, riddled with dangers I couldn't yet see. But I had come too far to turn back. I was no longer the woman they had thought they could break. I was the storm they never expected, and I would not stop until every last one of them had paid the price. The dawn broke sluggishly, bleeding pale light into the corners of my apartment, where shadows still clung stubbornly. I hadn't slept, not really. My mind was a tempest of plans and what-ifs, the weight of the coming storm pressing down like a vice. Marcus's words echoed relentlessly in my head. You have no idea what you're up against. But I did. I knew every move he could make, every secret weapon hidden in the shadows. I had to, because if I faltered, just once, it would mean the end of everything. Daniel and I spent days piecing together the tangled web Marcus had spun. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, black market dealings. It was a fortress built on lies and deceit. But every fortress had its weak points. I found it, Daniel said one evening, his finger tracing a faint watermark on a document. A back door. A financial leak that could bring everything crashing down. Hope ignited in me, fierce and bright. The next move had to be precise, ruthless, final. Under cover of darkness, I met with Daniel in a deserted warehouse on the city's edge. The air was thick with dust and the scent of rust, but there was no room for hesitation. Together we prepared the data for release, encrypted files containing everything Marcus and Lila had desperately tried to hide. As I uploaded the final documents to a secure channel, my fingers trembled, not from fear but anticipation. The world would soon see the truth. Within hours, the revelations exploded across media outlets worldwide. Headlines screamed of corruption, betrayal, and scandal. Marcus's empire was crumbling. But with the destruction came danger. Shadows lengthened. I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting. That night, a single black envelope slid under my door. No words. Just a chilling symbol, a snake coiled around a dagger. Marcus's threat was clear. The war had escalated from whispers to weapons. Days later, I confronted Lila one final time. Her eyes were wild with fear and fury. You've ruined us, she hissed. You'll pay for this. I met her gaze unflinchingly. I've already paid, I said softly. But I'm not done yet. I realized then that revenge had become more than reclaiming what was stolen. It had become a mirror, reflecting my darkest fears, my deepest scars. Could I rise from the ashes without losing myself completely? The night air was thick with tension, each breath I took sharp and biting. The city below was a sprawling sea of lights and shadows, unaware that the battle for justice, revenge, and redemption was reaching its final crescendo in the quiet streets above. I stood in the center of my living room, the weight of the past months pressing down on me like 1,000 stones. The files, the evidence, the countless hours of planning, all had led to this moment. Tonight, I would face them, Lila, Marcus, and the ghosts of my past. The phone rang. A single, piercing sound that shattered the stillness. I answered without hesitation. Meet me at the old warehouse. Now. The voice was cold, unfamiliar, but unmistakably dangerous. The building was a forgotten relic, abandoned and cloaked in darkness. My footsteps echoed as I moved through the cavernous space, heart pounding in time with the distant drip of water from a leaky pipe. From the shadows emerged Marcus, flanked by Lila. Their faces were masks of fury and desperation. You've destroyed everything, Marcus spat, eyes blazing. But this isn't over. I met their gaze, steady and unyielding. It's over for you, I said, voice low and deadly. Justice isn't just words, it's action. Words became weapons. Accusations flew, secrets spilled, and the truth, raw and unforgiving, cut through the lies they had built. Lila lunged, fury unleashed, but I was ready. The fight was no longer just physical. It was mental, emotional, a battle for control. You lost yourself when you betrayed me, I said, voice rising. Now watch me reclaim everything. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Evidence I had handed over was enough to topple their empire once and for all. As they were taken away in handcuffs, the weight lifted from my chest, replaced by a hollow victory. The war was won, but the scars remained. Months later, standing by the window of my new apartment, I watched the sunrise over the city. The past was behind me, but its lessons were etched deep in my soul. I was no longer the woman who had lost everything. I was reborn, and finally free. The morning light spilled softly through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new apartment, painting the hardwood floors with gentle hues of gold and rose. The city hummed quietly below, a distant symphony of life moving forward, indifferent yet comforting. For the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed without the heavy weight of vengeance crushing my chest. I stood at the window, a warm cup of tea cradled between my hands, watching as the world awakened. The cold, relentless nights had given way to mornings like this, calm, full of promise. Slowly, I was learning what it meant to live again. The first time I ventured into the park after everything, the air was crisp with the scent of freshly turned earth and blooming flowers. Sunlight filtered through the canopy of trees, dappled and warm against my skin. I walked slowly, listening to the laughter of children and the soft rustle of leaves. For the first time, I felt present. Not lost in memories of betrayal or plans of revenge, but here, alive, breathing, healing. A small bird hopped onto a nearby branch, its song clear and bright. It was a simple moment, but for me, it was a miracle. Rebuilding trust wasn't easy. I had shut myself away for months, wary of letting anyone close. But slowly, I began reaching out. Friends I had drifted from responded with cautious warmth. Old wounds began to stitch closed. One evening, over dinner with a longtime friend, I laughed. Truly laughed. For the first time in ages. The sound was strange, almost foreign, but it filled the room with light. "I miss this," I confessed quietly. "You deserve this," she said, her eyes kind. "You deserve happiness." And maybe I did. I rediscovered parts of myself I thought were lost forever. Painting, something I'd abandoned in the chaos, became a refuge. The brushstrokes were messy at first, raw and uncertain, but with each canvas, I poured out pain, hope, and strength. The colors bloomed like a phoenix rising from ashes. Each painting told a story of survival, resilience, and rebirth. Some nights were harder than others. The memories crept in unbidden, shadows in the dark, whispers from the past. But I faced them now with a steadiness I never had before. I learned to sit with the silence, to hold my own hand when the loneliness pressed close. Healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one I was willing to take. As the seasons turned, I felt the old walls inside me fall away, brick by brick. The woman who had been broken, betrayed, and poisoned was still a part of me, but she was no longer all I was. Now I was more, stronger, wiser, ready to write a new story, one not defined by the past, but by the courage to move forward. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on my face. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was mine. And that was enough.